Transformative Principal, episode 48 with Dr. Spike Cook. Welcome to Transformative Principal, the show where we learn every week from a leader who's making a difference, how to become better and improve our schools. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. You can find great resources and the show notes at transformativeprincipal.com.
Okay, well, my name is Spike Cook. I'm an elementary principal in Millville, New Jersey. I've been there for about 3.5 years, and I just recently published a book called Connected Leadership. It's just a click away through Corwin, through their new Connected Educator series. So I am really excited to be here and talking with you, Jethro.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to have you. I bought your book as soon as I saw that it was released, and by the time I got to it, I must have been a little bit late. There were no copies available on Amazon. It was going to take a couple weeks to ship, so I was bummed that I didn't get it as quickly. But since I got it, I've been reading it a little bit, trying to pace myself and not read it all and then forget it. And so I pick it up every couple days and read a chapter, and I've really liked what you have so far. What is your favorite part of the book?
I think my favorite part is the part where I talk about developing and utilizing your professional learning network or your personal learning network, your PLN. Because quite honestly, I wouldn't be able to do any of this stuff if it wasn't for people like yourself, who I've followed for, since I got on Twitter, and Jessica Johnson and Kurt Reese and Eric Sheninger and Peter DeWitt, like all these people, probably unbeknownst to them, paved a way for me to start doing the things that I'm doing. And I guess, if you go back to Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, I'm a connector, but I was always so hesitant about social media. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a generational thing. Maybe it was a privacy thing. I don't know. I had a lot of hang-ups about it, and I'll be very honest with you. And it took 3 months, and I was taking karate at the time from a guy who kind of fashioned himself as the social media sensei. And he would talk to me about, all the different things that he was doing. Ironically, connecting with other karate institutions, going to conferences, meeting up with people, getting ideas, getting his content out there, blogging. And I'm telling you, I was just there to learn some karate, and I had no idea what this guy was talking about. And I would say to him after class, well, you really can't do that in education. And he sort of laughed and said, "Are you sure about that? Have you ever looked?" Obviously, he had. And it was January, of 2012, where I finally said, "This is what I'm going to do." So I'm very close to getting my 3-year anniversary. So I say all that to say, the crux of all this, as far as connected leadership, in my opinion, really is that professional and personal learning network.
Mm-hmm. And so I agree that PLN is so vital. And one of the things that I've struggled with is sometimes I feel like there's nobody out there. I'm following all these people. Some people are following me, but I'm not having the interaction sometimes. And so I feel like I'm learning a ton, but not what I'm sharing may not be received, and I don't know that it is. You said that you've been following me for a while, but I may not know that. How do you have that interaction? How do you feel like you're actually contributing and not just always taking?
That's a great question. And it's funny, I struggle with that as well, as far as understanding and being able to look at the connections. And I think it's changed a little bit. I mean, I'm sure you would say the same thing
Mm-hmm.
that, most people now are just following hashtags, and they don't necessarily follow people, or even maybe they're not as interactive as maybe they used to be, and also there's a lot of the back channeling through Voxer and, Google Plus and stuff like that that's happening. So I guess the way I look at it as, yes, I do feel like I take a lot and I try to give as much. Now, how do I know who's reading and how many people are reading? The only thing that I really know is just through the statistics, like on my blog, or um, if I'm getting retweets or favorites or something like that. I try to, the best I can, thank people for mentioning, give them, like a lot of times, like, thank you for the kind words if they said something about my post, because I know that that's that extra step that a lot of people don't necessarily take. And I don't know if that's maybe what you were getting at, because, I read, your blog about, moving up to Alaska and stuff like that, and of course I want to, tell the world, like, hey, this is really cool. You should check this out. But I don't know if a lot of people, right now, that are actually maybe taking that next step. And I think that's where you really have to. I think the more that you share and the more that you include people, the better the reaction, or the better the interaction is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really great point. And the the thing that doesn't matter to me is whether or not people really are. It's that I feel like I'm contributing. I've learned so much. I don't want to be someone who's just like, oh yeah, I'll just take all these great things from everybody and then not ever give back to them. I want to be able to say, you help me, here's a way that I'm helping you. And sometimes that's not easy. And but I think your point about just sharing is the right thing to do, and sharing in a way that when you find something good, you put it out there and you share it with people. That's a powerful thing, and I appreciate your message on that.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that there's a few people out there, that are sharing their blog posts, whether it's their school blog posts or their personal one. And I've noticed that, like, say, they'll just tag a bunch of people in there. Now, when I first started to get these, I was thinking that maybe it was because there was something that I had contributed in there. So I go through, I read the blog posts, and it may not have anything to do with me, right? Or at least I
Mm-hmm.
think. But I think from the author's perspective, they're saying, like, hey, can you check this out? Or maybe you did inspire this, but you don't even realize it,
Mm-hmm.
or I thought this would be something that would be good for you. Because then I would go back and I would look at their tweets, and they may send out, four or five of them and tag four or five people in each of those posts. And I just thought, that's a neat idea, you know. Almost like, giving somebody credit, or giving somebody a heads up, because sometimes, and I say this a lot in my workshops, the fire hydrant of information, a lot of people talk about that, that
Mm-hmm.
that is out there right now is immense. I mean, if 90% of the world's uh, information has been created within the last 3 years, like, how in the world are you going to keep up with everything? So,
Yeah.
and I do talk about that a bit in the book, where, I give the reader some different suggestions on, how to make sense of all of this. But because I think if you try to, take it all in, it's really going to be a big letdown, because there's going to be too much. You're going to be saturated, or you're going to have a difficulty in finding your way. So that's why, I talk about, starting small, and really connecting, with a few group of people. And that's what I did, and I felt like that's what worked. I found some really good people that were great, social media mentors, and I could learn from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you said so much good stuff there. How do you deal with that deluge of information? I mean, you're following like 1,000 people on Twitter, countless blogs, I'm sure. And how do you what are your strategies for dealing with all of that coming in?
Well, I'm probably one of the worst people, and I think we all are. The more connected we are, we're the worst people to ask because
Mm-hmm.
we're constantly on it, and because that you have to keep up with things. But what I tell people who are first starting out is if you could just do maybe 10 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days a week, and just during that a little bit of time, you could get through probably 2 or 3 blog posts and just kind of cull through your Twitter feed. Um, because I think that's important that you start small. I mean, if you were to ask my wife, or probably the most, the spouses of all the
Mm-hmm.
most connected people that we know, you know that we're on there a lot, and we actually have to sometimes take breaks and things like that. But because like to me, it doesn't seem like work. Like to
Mm-hmm.
read, for instance, to read your blog about moving up to Alaska, to me, that was more enjoyment than maybe, reading a very specific thing that I had to do for work. Like, I don't look at that as work. I look at that as like, wow, that's pretty cool. Here's another fellow principal that I can say that I'm friends with, that I know about, that look at the chance that he took. And so to me, that doesn't seem like a lot of work. To me, that's good stuff. So, you start small and then you start to build. I think one of the things is really helpful is participating in Twitter chats, where you can devote an hour to connecting with a bunch of people. But I'm very selective. There's sometimes where um, I will participate, but maybe I won't even retweet anything, or I'll just lurk and learn, because
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about that in the book on, lurking and learning, the term I
Right.
learned from Eric Sheninger. But, you know, yeah, I think that's important too, where it's like, you don't always have to be the one, like you were saying before, that has to get that information out there. Sometimes you just need a little bit of, time to process things. And I think doing that and lurking and learning, really, really helps out. Um, because sometimes people, they don't, that's all they want to do. And I think that's kind of getting at your earlier question. Because they don't feel like they either have something to say, or what they say isn't important, or maybe if they did a blog post or something and they tried to pay it forward, that maybe people would laugh at them or whatever. And as well as I do, that just doesn't happen. My blog posts are riddled with grammatical errors and syntax issues and things like that. But I feel like, my PLN, sort of looks through some of that, looks beyond some of that, because they're looking at what's the content, or what's the real, meat and potatoes of this. Because I
Mm-hmm.
really look at blogging as like a reflective, almost journal entry type of thing. So, when you look at the deluge of all this information coming in, it can be overwhelming. So you have to set, kind of like what you talked about, you have to set processes in place. So how are you going to take this information, use it, and and then maybe take it to the next level.
Yeah, totally. And what are some of the things that you do specifically to deal with that? Like when you get on Twitter, are you just looking through your 1,000 followers and saying, whatever happened in the last 10 minutes, I'm going to look at, or are you talked a little bit about hashtags earlier. Are you focusing on specific hashtags and only following those?
That's a good question. I think what I really try to do is, and I actually blogged about this, because I think a lot of people are simply following hashtags, and they have like Hootsuite or TweetDeck, and they're constantly just looking through the hashtags that they're involved in. I
Mm-hmm.
think we start to forget about the people we're following.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually did a blog post about this. They're like, do you follow your followers? you know the people who you're following, do you really read what they're putting out, or do you just follow them, because they said something that you liked, and then you follow them and you move on, to once again following the hashtags and stuff. So I will specifically go through my feed and look for things that people I am following are posting. Um, and yes, that could be 10 or 15 minutes where I'm just sort of, culling through that information. I really don't use as much as I think a lot of other people do. I don't really use like TweetDeck and Hootsuite that much. I mean, I have Hootsuite, but I usually only use that when I'm doing like a Twitter chat or something like that. I just I like the app. I mean, you can search hashtags on there anyway, so sometimes I will look up hashtags, but I really like to see what are people putting out there, the people that I like. Um, I've also started to get into lists.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't use those for the longest time, um, and so I follow some lists where you have people who are maybe like-minded like you, like an elementary principals or high school principals, and then you can put them on a list and see what are some things that they're putting out there. Um, so that's usually my progression, and I really do feel like it's important that you have to read a blog post and retweet it. Sometimes the blog post names are very catchy, and I've seen that happen to me where I'll put something out, it may have a catchy title, and I'll think to myself, like, 1 minute later somebody's retweeted it, and I'm like, did you really read that? Because like, don't just do it for the title, or it's because I just put it out there. Make sure that you're you're reading it.
Yeah. So the lists are something that I've started using myself, and I've just been creating my own lists, and you can see them on my Twitter profile. But what that's done for me is that's allowed me to pick specific people or specific types of people, and focus on what they're saying. So, like, I have a transformative principles list that is people that are principals that are also tweeting, and then I can just go through that and look at what those people are saying. But I also have other interests like startup businesses and design and sports and things like that. And so I have those lists separated so that I can focus a little bit more. I'm not sure if that's the best way to do it, um, but it's something that has been working for me to make things a little bit more manageable. So I feel like I can really connect with certain people a little bit better, and that's been something that has helped me. Are you creating your own lists, or are you following lists that other people create?
Right now, I'm just following some lists that other people have made. So, because I just think that um, there's a few things out there that I really like. There's a few people out there that I really like, and um, it's just something that I haven't gotten into until recently. So I like the concept of it, and I'm a lot like you in the sense too, where like I like to listen and follow people who aren't necessarily in education as well.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of you know, the podcast that I may listen to, or articles that I may read are very similar. Like, I love entrepreneurs. I love the fact of them, taking risks and doing startups and creating new technologies. Comedy and sports, things like that. I really do try to, keep my world, so to speak, as expanded as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so much that we can learn from those other areas as well, and so much that we can bring into education to help us be more effective leaders, which I find amazing too. Some of the blogs that I get my best ideas from have nothing at all to do with education, and they just help me think about things in a different way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, what I try to do is, incorporate that into the other things that I'm already doing. So, if I'm driving, I have about a 45-minute drive to work. I'll put something on, or I'll listen to, Voxer, or podcasts, and then,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm walking or running, I try to, try to exercise. It doesn't always work out that way.
Right.
So I try to use that time, as much as I can. Because I love to listen to podcasts. I don't know, it's just really, really cool. I like, I like the whole process that people could do this, on their own, and, take their learning to the next level. And I think that's important. And I just learned that from people, people on Twitter and Google Plus and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And the things that we learn, I one of the things that is difficult for me is that because we're connected and we have so many connections, we don't always remember exactly where we learn things from, which I think speaks to your point about sharing the things that you learn, and recognizing where you're getting the great things you're doing from. I think that's really important. Something I personally need to work on a little bit better that I'm trying to do, but there's always room for improvement.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think, it's funny that you say that. I was just reading something, this morning about, a blogger who, had shared some resources in a video, and then somebody questioned, that person about where they got their information from, and the fact was that, they did cite their resource, but perhaps the person they were citing, it wasn't the one that had put it out first,
Mm-hmm.
and it became this whole thing. And I kind of watched the thread and all that kind of stuff. And, it's a shame because I think as we grow, with information, obviously you don't want people hacking your stuff. You don't want people, taking an image that you take and then, using it and claiming it as their own. But like you said, there's so many things that are out there, and if you get an idea or a line from something or something that somebody said, it's not like you're taking that. It's just that you're kind of just then taking it maybe to the next level, or pushing it out, or interpreting it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I- so I think that it could be, something where, if you, do your best to kind of say, like, these are the things that I'm thinking about, and this is where I got them from. That's great. But like you said, there's some things that you're not going to be able to trace it back to that, original source. And let's be honest, we're not writing, dissertations here.
Right.
We are writing things to help people, get to their next level of whether it's teaching or leadership or what have you.
Thank you so much for downloading and listening to this podcast. Please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher, and please feel free to give us a rating on Stitcher Radio or on iTunes so that we can help spread the word about how much we're learning in this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones.